Are two 40Hz gaming laptops worth it? I've been waiting to get one for testing ever since first seeing them on display at CES back in January. So let's find out if they're a game changer or a gimmick. Just as a refresher, lame pun intended, the refresh rate of your screen is how many times the image changes per second. So for a 240Hz screen, like the one I've got in this Aorus 15 gaming laptop, that means the screen will change 240 times. Before this, 144Hz was the best you could get in a laptop. However, external 240Hz monitors have been around for a while now. While 240Hz in a general sense is nothing new, we're only just now getting it available in laptops. And I've got some examples linked in the description. This is different to the frame rate, or FPS, your laptop can produce in games. For example, in Overwatch, with lower settings, it's possible to hit the 300 FPS frame cap. Despite the hardware being capable of producing high FPS, if you have a 60Hz screen, the screen is only going to be refreshed 60 times per second. This doesn't mean there's no point of going over 60 FPS though. It's kind of a different topic, but you can check the card in the top right corner where Tim from Hardware Unboxed covers why FPS higher than your refresh rate is still beneficial. To take full advantage of a high refresh rate display like 240Hz, you're going to want to be able to run games at high frame rates. The benefit of this is that games that are capable of producing high FPS feel smoother and more responsive. This is where we may start to run into problems with 240Hz laptops. Even the higher end gaming laptops can't compete to the specs available in a gaming PC. So depending on the game and settings you're playing with, you may not be able to get high enough frame rate to make the 240Hz worthwhile compared to a 144Hz alternative option. With that in mind, the Aorus 15 gaming laptop that I've got here has an Intel i7-9750H CPU and NVIDIA RTX 2070 graphics, no Max-Q here, so it should be able to perform pretty well for a portable machine. I'll just quickly blast through some benchmarks to give you an idea of what sort of FPS this level of specs gives us to see if the 1080p 240Hz screen is worth it. Overwatch runs well on pretty much any modern hardware, so even at ultra settings, we're seeing average FPS around 240, a good matchup for the 240Hz screen, with lower settings hitting the 300 FPS cap in this game. If I'm looking for it, I can just notice screen tearing, but you could just enable VSync and lock it to 240 FPS and keep it extremely smooth. Fortnite also runs quite well on pretty much anything. The low settings were getting us just below 240 FPS, though it's not as if we need to hit 240 FPS exactly. The fact is, this is still over 90 additional frames that would be shown on the screen each second when compared to 144Hz. CSGO was tested with the Euletical FPS benchmark, and even maxed out above 200 FPS was possible, with higher than 240 possible with lower settings. So again, a good game that would benefit from the 240Hz screen if you're playing competitively. I don't think Dota 2 really needs an insane frame rate, but at low settings, above 190 FPS was possible with this laptop. Rainbow Six Siege was tested with the built-in benchmark, and while higher settings were still giving good FPS in this test, low settings were getting us above 240 FPS. These are all less demanding games though. If we look at something else like Battlefield 5, even with low settings and RTX off, shown by the purple bar down the bottom, the frame rate is fine for a 144Hz screen. 240Hz would be unlikely to help further. PUBG is another quick example. Even at minimum settings, we're not seeing above 130 FPS. So it just goes to show that it really depends on the types of games you plan on playing and the settings used. In general, I'd only recommend a 240Hz laptop screen if you're going to be playing those esports titles that are actually able to run at high frame rates. Otherwise, you're probably not going to benefit much over a more standard 144Hz screen. I'm sure some people won't even be able to tell the difference between the two as well. Personally, I had a tough time. But using two machines together, I was able to notice the subtle difference. There's a much more obvious jump going from 60Hz to 144Hz. But the jump from 144Hz to 240Hz was much more minimal for me. I suspect it may vary between people. And to me, it seems to be a pretty niche option in a laptop, mainly for those playing esports titles competitively. Battery life is important when it comes to laptops, so does running the screen at a higher refresh rate use more battery power? As you can set the refresh rate of the screen, I've tested the battery life at 240Hz and 60Hz twice each. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to set 144Hz with this, but this does seem to indicate that the battery lasts longer while at 60Hz. All testing was done with the screen at 50% brightness with YouTube videos playing. On average, 60Hz is lasting 13.8% longer than 240Hz, so it could be worth changing this in Windows when on battery power. especially considering most laptops generally don't perform as well when compared to being plugged into the wall, so you probably won't be smashing 200 plus FPS anyway. Visually, I can't say there are any differences just looking at this 240Hz sharp panel compared to other 144Hz laptops I've recently tested. I've tested color gamut with the Spider 5, and we're looking at 97% of sRGB, 69% of NTSC, and 75% of Adobe RGB, so pretty decent results for a gaming laptop. At 100% brightness in the center, I measured the panel at 343 nits with an 860:1 contrast ratio. So overall, above average compared to others I've tested, meaning it doesn't look like there are any obvious compromises with this 240Hz panel. Viewing angles also looked fine to me on all angles. In terms of backlight bleed, it was looking pretty good. A small issue down the bottom right, but overall no difference from any other 144Hz panels I've tested, though this will of course vary between laptops. I'm happy to see 240Hz laptop panels coming to market. However, I do think they have a pretty niche use case at the moment, and are likely to be used as a selling point to people who may not even be able to utilize them. Again, it all comes down to the games you're playing and settings in use due to the hardware we've currently got in laptops, as well as even the individual looking at the panel. In the future, as our processor and graphics become more powerful, it may be easier to run such games at higher frame rates. As we saw in the benchmarks earlier, we generally need to be playing esports titles with lower settings in order to get high enough FPS to make 240Hz really worth it. Even then, the improvement over 144Hz was harder for me to notice, but I expect this sort of thing will vary between people, so it's probably a case of needing to try it out for yourself first if possible. At this time, I think 240Hz is more geared towards pro players where the difference may actually matter more. Though even then, it seems niche as you'd expect these guys to be playing on a desktop PC for best performance rather than a laptop. In terms of pricing differences, I haven't been able to find too many examples yet as these are still fairly new, but I'll link some 240Hz models in the description. The Aorus 15 I've got here with 240Hz screen is $2,200 at the moment, while the 144Hz model is $1,950. However, there's also a difference in CPU there, so this price difference isn't just the screen. Similar problems with other models I checked. They all went to 9th gen with 240Hz, so it's hard to see how much 240Hz only is costing us at this time. So what screen refresh rate will you be getting in your next laptop? Or will you be trying to buy a 240Hz panel to upgrade your current laptop? Let me know if you think it's worth it down in the comments, and if you're new to the channel, get subscribed for future tech videos like this one.